Welcome to One-on-One. I'm Greg Bassett, your host from the Salisbury Independent newspaper, and today we have my favorite public servant. He's back. He has been in the trenches, in the firing squad. This guy, Jack Lenox, welcome.
Great, thank you, Greg.
So you've had an interesting 6-8 months here. You've been part of a big thing that happened in our county, and that is this new zoning for poultry houses. Tell me about this, Jack. What's going on?
Well, it has been a very interesting time, and we all know about the importance of agriculture, but then how that plays out in people's day-to-day lives is something that we've all heard a great deal about and taken seriously, and had a lot of good public discussion about the future of poultry and frankly, the future of our neighborhoods as well along the way.
It's been a therapeutic exercise. It's been a very eye-opening exercise. It's one that's gotten everyone's attention. And this all started with a proposal to put more than the normal amount of chicken houses up on Northwest Road, not far from the city limits, and that just sort of took off into a firestorm.
Yes, that proposal did kind of focus the attention, but it's an issue that's been coming along for a while, and some of our neighbors in adjacent counties have been dealing with. And so it's not only happening in Northwest Road, it's not only happening in a certain part of our county. You know, it's something that the Eastern Shore is experiencing, you know, Delaware as well as Virginia. And when I say experiencing, I mean experiencing both the good and some of the bad that goes with that.
Right. Now, early on in this thing, it was tough, and I admired your grace under pressure. I really did. You were never rattled by any of this. And what the county executive did early on was cut the issue into two different focuses, one being health and one being zoning. Tell me about that.
In an ideal world, you have a grand theory, and you have one way of approaching a subject and one answer, the best answer you can come up with. That's in an ideal world. I think we all know the older we get, there is no grand theory. There's not one size fits all. And in order to try to reach the best conclusion that you can, which oftentimes involves compromise, you need first to get a really good handle on facts as you can best determine them. And so it was important to get a better handle for us on the science of it all.
Right.
And to ask everyone to weigh in, and even if there's not an absolute we know the answer conclusion, we need to get that sort of understanding, frankly, before you sort of jump to the last page of the book and determine this is what we're going to do about it. So from a traditional planning standpoint, and that's why in this case it's something, my first reaction is to say, let's define the problem before you try to agree on a solution.
Right. Now, early on with that, the council was looking at everything. They were being hit by people who were opposed by this, and they wanted to go to their guy, Jack Lenox, get him at the table and help us figure all this out. And the county executive said, no, you're not going to talk to Jack right now. we're going to have this discussion about the health issue. We're going to bring the state people in to talk about that. And then on the back side, we'll do the zoning stuff. What was it like for you at that time?
It's not something unlike other situations that I've faced in the past. I've never had the, I'll say, the advantage of working for only, one person. In this case, I do report to, Mr. Strasberg and Mr. Culver, but they don't want me to only do, what they say at that moment, because you do have a system that involves a sharing of authority and responsibility and the public. And it's important for us to set up a process to involve all of those. And I think that's where we are today.
Right. Now, in the health hearing, I learned stuff I didn't know. And I always thought that poultry houses were dangerous and were a problem to the environment. And these bureaucrats, excuse me, from the state came down. But not bureaucrats, but great scientists, people who devoted their lives to studying this stuff. And it made me realize that that these conditions couldn't be any better. It couldn't be any better for the environment than they are, as long as proper management takes place. There's not going to be a problem on these farms in terms of pollution or a health issue. Now, maybe I'm in the pocket of poultry, someone would say, because I said that, but it really swayed me to believe that the problem wasn't as severe as I thought it could possibly be. So that was a very educational experience. But then on the backside, you're in your office and you're coming up with an ingenious plan, I thought, to figure out what to do from the zoning aspects going forward. So tell me what you came up with for that.
First of all, zoning does not address all of our concerns, does not pretend to have an answer to everything. Zoning inherently comes out of basically nuisance law, if you go back in history.
Right.
It's trying to separate out sort of the bad things. And I'll say it in a classic way. You know that you need to have a junkyard, but it's probably not a good idea to have it next to a single-family residence. And so you start to separate out through zoning different areas where uses are most appropriate. Along the way, you always try to go back, have a fallback though, to watch out for property rights, personal property rights, and that again is both sides of the line. It's the person looking to use his property and the person next door who's looking not to be adversely impacted. So when we come back to zoning, it is one piece, and obviously I feel comfortable discussing the Planning Commission's response to the council proposal and then how that moves ahead. But also there's a piece on the side of this, and that's some of that science. We still need to do more with groundwater. We still need to do more with air quality, both in understanding the issue and then also preparing for its impacts. On the zoning side, it is back to, again, a classic, what areas under our comprehensive plan, under our zoning, do we set aside as being the most appropriate for agriculture? And then conversely, what areas do we feel are most appropriate for other types of development, being residential and commercial? And the idea that you do have adverse impacts, back to that junkyard example,
Right.
They're inherent to it. Funny thing that I've learned about farmers, they don't really want people living next door to them. And so what you have then, when you all come to that point of discussion and agreement, is you realize you do have a common interest, and hopefully we are reflecting that in our zoning.
Right. But you also went and invented an entirely different system for where poultry houses could go.
It's different than in the past, and it's important to point out that in the past, poultry houses could go almost anywhere with very little regulation, and in fact, not even a building permit.
Right.
So, life gets more complicated. Review processes do, thankfully, in my side, but then there's that balance as well. So what we've done in the proposal that will be soon going to public hearing through the county council is to reflect our comprehensive plan, our own existing zoning, and to just try to make sure that they are all relatively consistent. So yes, it's a very new approach to poultry, but it's consistent with the way we've addressed a lot of other things.
Right. I was stunned when I first saw the map and saw where poultry houses could have gone before. Practically like in downtown Powellville, you could have put a poultry house. And I thought about that because I remember when there was a pig farm in the middle of downtown Powellville years ago, and just how that smelled. I mean, it was a nightmare there. But you changed that. So tell me what those districts are, what you're calling those districts now.
Essentially what we fell back to was to say that we have residential districts in the county, and those residential districts need to be protected. It's not just for existing development, but we do hope to continue to grow in the future. So you might ask the question, and I always thought about this from a very personal standpoint. When, if you come to the area and you go out to look for a place that you'd like to live and for your family to locate, oftentimes people warn you. They say, don't move in next to a chicken house. And people say, you're right. I'm going to go out, I'm going to check the zoning, I'm going to look at my neighborhood, I'm going to see where the schools are, and all the other factors that go into choosing a house. And then you feel good with your decision. Oftentimes people never thought about the fact that in a very nice residential neighborhood where we are telling people to go, please go there, that something could come in next door and as recently as just a couple years ago, not even had a building permit. And so, again, we want to sort those things out. So we want to give agriculture a good opportunity to locate, to thrive, to support our economy, and also reflect, though, back on the potential impacts if it goes the wrong way. And I think that's the balance we're trying to achieve.
Right, and the right to farm rules were made with good intentions in that farmers were shut out all the time. They would have proper zoning. They couldn't put a chicken house or a field in because residents had moved in. To me, it's like the people who live near in Kilburn complaining about the airport. I'm just baffled by that. You can't expand the airport. Well, you shouldn't have moved in next to the airport. You know.
Right.
So if you're going to build in a development in the middle of a cornfield, there's going to be corn grown there. Don't be surprised when that happens.
Yes, no, that's the case, and you can bring up other examples as you have, for example, the airport or on a busy street, or those who choose to live in a rural area. And then this is sort of the clash of values that can take place. You buy a home out in the county, and then you try to make that part of the county more like the city or town that you just left. And that's the conflict. So at this point, there's also been a realization, I think, with some of and when we say agriculture, it's rural property owners that say, you know, creating a couple of lots, building in an inherent conflict to my larger purpose may not be the best thing. And so that gets back to discussions that we had a few years ago about cluster development, preserving rural areas of the county. This issue, I think, fortunately, and there's always a positive side to something like this, it's brought to the fore the point that we discussed several years ago that said, oh yeah, it may not be the best thing to go out and put residential areas next to what is a driving force in our economy.
Right. What was the process like internally? This thing is snowballing, and you get with your team, and you're like, "This is how we're going to lead our way out. This is what we're going to propose to the Planning Commission." What happened internally to make this happen?
It's more of a back and forth, sort of an iterative process where, you know, I'm not here, and as a professional planner, you know, we are not here to tell the community what they want and to tell them what they want to be, but it's to be able to listen. And to listen to the elected officials, to listen to our appointed board members, and I'm fortunate to have a great planning commission that provides really good positive feedback, and the public. You know, one of the difficulties from a staff standpoint is that if we go into a discussion and we've already drafted, there's an agenda, there's a staff report, and the last thing is a recommendation, that's difficult at times before you have the public input.
Right.
So in terms of that process, one of the things that the Planning Commission decided to do, you know, and we supported the agreement, was go to public hearing, have the topic, listen to people, and then come back and do okay, we've all heard this, we have a good handle on the best information we can get, not everything, but then figuring out how to move ahead rather than to go out front to the issue. So the public hearing that we had with the Planning Commission, I think was very helpful in terms of just letting folks talk and giving us
and they
everything.
did. And they did. And they were off topic in terms of what your responsibilities are a lot, but you guys showed great patience and politeness and respect in letting everyone have their say. You really did.
Thank you. That was the goal. And the other thing was, you hear what happens at what I sometimes call open mic night. And then as a parallel to that, you have information that people are sincerely trying to present as facts. And for an elected or appointed board to sit there and to hear what sometimes sound to be competing facts, it means you do have to just be patient. You have to ask for documentation. And then perhaps in the quiet of your own evening at home, read through it.
Right.
And say, if you're going to drop a 10 or 20 page study on my desk, I will read it, I will consider it, but we need a little bit of time to pull all this together. And that's what they did too. So they opened the record before the hearing for submission of written documents. The record stayed open afterwards, and folks had a chance on their own side to go to the hearing and then come back and say, I've heard what people have said, here's what I think. And so they had that as well.
Yeah, I learned a lot there too. I mean, you would think I would know everything after doing this for so long, but But in that one meeting, there was a long discussion about something going on in Princess Anne in Somerset
Yes.
County. And I was just so dismissive. I was like, why are we talking about that? Because it
Yes.
has nothing to do with us. And I mentioned that to a public official, and they said, no, that person's viewpoint was important because what's going on there could go on here.
Yes.
And the mindset reflects what's going on across the spectrum.
Yes.
So it's still educational and helpful. It's important to listen to that. And I was like, you're right, I'm being petty.
I don't know if petty's the word, but we can't be too quick to dismiss someone's opinion because they've had experiences somewhere else.
Right. Now, some of the stuff, you talk about the nuisance thing, it's not so much zoning, but some of the rules that go on within the property. There's a buffer requirement now, there's a driveway turnaround road access requirement. Tell me a little bit about that.
There's some separation issues where you say it's not just a setback from a property line, although that's being enhanced as well. It also has to do with context. And it's not good or bad, up or down, no matter where it is. Certain areas it fits better. Certain areas need an added review process. And so when you look at the ag district, we're saying in that area, that is where you should look first. But then, depending on certain site conditions, location design will be modified. So you find out where existing dwellings are, where the neighborhoods are, if there's schools nearby or daycare centers or other sort of sensitive receptors.
Right.
And so once you identify that, then you are dealing with different separations. You may find the perfect site. There probably isn't a perfect site, but there's sites better than others. And then you provide, depending on those local site conditions, planted buffer that is specified now and required to be maintained. That's what happens out in the ag district. In terms of the residential districts, you have all of that, but then another layer of protection, and that's a special exception process, and that's significant. That's to say, there are properties that perhaps you could do a poultry house in our designated growth areas, but we're going to take an extra careful, close look at those.
Right. And the process for that is special exception. It has to go through the Planning Commission, and then where?
Actually, a special exception is not the Planning Commission, it's the Board of Appeals.
Just go straight to the Board of Appeals.
Formerly known as the Board of Zoning Appeals.
Right.
They are the ones that deal with special exceptions, and they have that authority. And what's good about that is that it's a very public process. There is notification given, not just through posting of the property or the legal ads in the paper, but notification to the next door folks. And they have standing, those folks next door. And that means that they are a participant in the process. And then as you ask the question, where does it go from there? There's the opportunity for legal challenge on both sides. And then we'll be back before circuit court.
So special exceptions don't go to the county council?
No, they do not.
Okay.
No, it's an important appointment that they make, as well as the one that they make to a sister organization, which is the Planning and Zoning Commission.
Right.
But no, they have authority. They're actually the appellate board of the county. So what used to be called the Board of Zoning Appeals, now just simply the Board of Appeals. It's more than just sort of a rhetorical change. They get appeals from almost all of the various codes of the county.
I didn't know that. Wow. Okay.
They do. And
Yeah.
so if you have a dispute, for example, the Planning Commission makes a subdivision decision.
Right.
That can be appealed to them. We have a couple of fortune tellers, and that appeal goes there. Taxi licenses could go before them. It's the series of decisions that are made at the county level through the various boards to try to do one more look before you get involved in the legal system, in the court system.
Interesting. Your Planning Commission chairman, Chip DeShiel, a great example of leadership through this. Again, a very patient, polite man.
Yes, he absolutely is, and it's a gift, and one that we try to put to use as much as we can because we do test his patience. He's
I've never seen him rattled in all the years, and I've asked him a lot of dumb questions, and he's answered all of them.
Yes, yes. Controversy is not Chip's favorite thing to deal with, but I think he knows that it goes with the job, and it's that steady hand again that I appreciate very much.
Yeah, he's amazing. And you've got some great members on there too,
Yes.
some smart guys.
Yeah, it's the joint appointment process that is unique to Wycomico County and the city of Salisbury. I know that the mayor and on the city side, obviously, and the executive take that appointment process very seriously, and they look at the group, and you try to get one that is reflective of the county and the city and represents a variety of interests, because it is, if any of us go too far in any one direction in terms of growth or no growth, good or bad, you need that balance, and it's a good group right now and very well balanced.
The county liaison is Mark Kilmer, the county councilman.
Yes.
And I have seen previously the different liaisons, not always in Wycomico, but other counties too, where they'll inject politics. When they report back to the council what happened on zoning, they don't tell the whole story or everything. But Mark's reports about what the Planning Commission was thinking back to the council were always right on. It always reflected everything that I knew what was going on.
Mark is still new. He's in his first term on both the council.
Maybe he'll learn to be
and
more
commission.
more circumspect as time goes on.
Yeah, Mark is, as you say, he just dove right in, and he's very sincere. He puts a lot of effort into it, and we need that relationship. On the city side, Jack Heath is the city representative. To have the president of the city council sitting there, again, it's great for feedback. With Mark and with Jack to know, we're going to make a recommendation. Okay, guys, tell us how are they going to hear this? What should we be talking about? And to try to avoid sort of endless back and forth that you could have if you didn't have that communication.
Right. The Northwest opponents early on took this to county council. County council tried to sidestep it. It looked like to me, oh, the state's going to decide that, and that's a zoning issue, and we're not, we're not going to get involved. But the opponents would not let the council sit out on it. Then it turned into, well, the pronouncements, we're going to get all of you out of office, we're voting you all out. It looked like it was going to be a big mess.
Sure.
But in the end, the system worked, and it was like a big victory for everyone, it seems like to me.
The jury is still out, as it were, on that end, in Northwest Road in particular.
Yeah.
I don't want to suggest that the folks who came out in very heated fashion, sincere fashion, in opposition, I'm not sure that the outcome is going to be the one that they are particularly comfortable with in the long term. But, we learn things as we go along, and as you mentioned initially, that was the first big one.
Yeah. Yeah, and maybe they'll make it better for others somewhere else.
Oh, certainly.
Yeah.
That's exactly what it is, because it's not just that street, it's not just that at end or the east side or the west side of the county. It is essentially, we are 400 square miles. 2/3 of our county is agriculturally zoned. And in all parts of the county, if they haven't experienced it by today, we'll probably experience it next week. Hopefully we've learned some lessons and we're all better off for it.
So Northwest Road, who's going to decide what happens there?
They are vested in a great respect in terms of when they acquired the property and the rules that they're operating under. And, short of a court appeal taking on something, it will likely proceed in one form or another.
And the state will make that, the state will approve it, and then the Planning Commission, or?
It would not be the Planning Commission.
Okay.
Again, it is, recall we
They already
started out
meet all the
saying
criteria.
if they meet it, it's allowed.
Right.
And so when the state deals with erosion and sediment control, when the county administering the state MDE stormwater guidelines conclude that it meets that, they submit building plans that meet the building code. The system says you're approved.
How's the Planning Commission agenda looking? What's coming up for development in our community?
We've started to see a little bit more activity. There's sort of I think a misunderstanding out there that we're going to see things first when the economy looks to change. And while that sounds logical, I think we also know that there's so much inventory that the others will see it before the Planning Commission does, because before you get to speculative developments, residentially, let's say, we're going to see the time on market for housing sales get shorter. You're going to see vacancies filled up. folks who haven't been able to sell their house for something that they needed to get,
Right.
to cover the mortgage over the last few years. That will start to change. Then we'll start to see some new projects. We have not seen new speculative projects yet, although there are indicators that the market is getting better, it is getting stronger. We start to see a few more commercial proposals. We're starting to see them on the city side. So mostly Planning Commission, remember it's that joint commission, one agenda, but working
Right.
under two different codes. We start to see more activity commercially on the city, and you know what? That's the county's comp plan.
Right.
It's designated growth towards areas, Delmar, Fruitland, Salisbury, the communities. They're going to see it first, and they are starting to see it.
Are you excited by what's being proposed for downtown?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Do you have any hope that it's going to work?
I do. I do. I worked previously, and you may have heard of Plymouth, Massachusetts.
Yes.
The tagline is America's hometown. When I was working
I never would have
there,
left the Cape. I don't know why they went inland. Provincetown's beautiful.
Yes,
but
it
I've never
is.
been there in the winter. Maybe that's the problem.
And I think there's something about water too. So
There's that, yeah. Anyway, sorry, go ahead.
No, that's fine. I worked through a situation where their entire downtown was torn up. It was literally a dirt road, and it was because the economy, the mall classic story.
Yeah.
The mall built out at the highway, stores leave downtown, old infrastructure, and we bit the bullet and said, we've just got to do this. And the parallels now to the idea of the Main Street Master Plan in downtown, I know there will be disruption, but it will be worth it in the end. The product will be worth it, and you will have a downtown that's never the large users anymore. We learned from other people's experiences, in poultry and also with downtowns. Oh, I have great hope for it, particularly really good signs right now in terms of leadership and people working together.
Yeah, and that's so much of it is attitude and energy. It really is.
Yeah, it is. And remember, there's a whole market side of this. And it's not just us, say, beating ourselves up and going, well, we made bad decisions. There's a market. There's investment out there. And I think there's a snowball effect here, too. That now once you see that certain people, again, time on market, talk to the commercial brokers, see what space is available, and there's not nearly as much now as there was last week or last year or 5 years ago. We went through a time period where no properties transferred in downtown, and that's definitely not the case now.
Wow. Jack Lenox, you're my hero. I'm not allowed to say that as a reporter, but I just admire so much what you do, and I really appreciate your service, and thank you.
Thank you, Greg. I appreciate you having me today.
He's Jack Lenox. He's public servant extraordinaire. He's unbelievable. Thank you. Okay. I'm Greg Bassett from the Salisbury Independent Newspaper. Another edition of One-on-One right here on PAC 14.
First Shore Federal is proud to support PAC 14 and One-on-One. We'd encourage every business to support PAC 14 and pick a program and support it, and let's make a difference.